As a paramedic, I've seen things most people wouldn't want to imagine. But that night, the fog lay thick over the city, the moon shrouded behind clouds, casting an eerie darkness on everything. We received a call about a heart attack victim, and despite the ominous atmosphere, I felt nothing out of the ordinary as we headed to the location. The house was at the end of a long, narrow street lined with ancient, twisted trees. Their branches hung over the road like skeletal fingers, creating a tunnel of shadows. My partner Mike and I exchanged a glance, the kind that needs no words to communicate that something felt off. We pulled up to the house, a decaying Victorian mansion, its windows broken and boarded up. It looked abandoned, but the caller's number was from here. We grabbed our gear and headed inside. The door creaked open, revealing a dark hallway lit only by our flashlights. The air was cold, colder than it should have been in August, and smelled of damp and decay. The silence was palpable, broken only by the soft echo of our footsteps on the wooden floorboards. We found the man in the living room, lying on a dusty old sofa. He was still, his skin ashen. I checked his pulse, nothing. We started the usual procedures, but it was clear he was gone. Time of death was logged, and we prepared to transport the body. As we lifted him onto the stretcher, I felt a shiver run down my spine. His body was cold, too cold, like it had been in a freezer. We covered him with a sheet and secured him in the ambulance. The ride back was silent, Mike driving through the foggy streets while I sat in the back with the body. The route took us through a forested area, the trees looming over the road like giants in the dark. I tried to distract myself by going over the report, but the stillness in the back of the ambulance was unsettling. I could hear the engine, the hum of the tires on the road, and something else. A faint rustling, like fabric against fabric. I glanced at the sheet-covered body. It hadn't moved, and I tried to convince myself it was just the bumps in the road. But then, the sheet began to slowly slide off the man's face, revealing his cold, lifeless eyes staring straight at me. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I leaned forward to pull the sheet back up, but as I did, the man's mouth fell open. I could have sworn I heard a whisper, a low, guttural sound. I jerked back, my breath quickening. I reached for the radio to call Mike, but the static was all I heard. The lights inside the ambulance flickered, casting eerie shadows around me. Suddenly, the ambulance hit a bump, and the body rolled slightly towards me. I gasped, the fear gripping me like a vice. I knew it was just the motion, but my mind raced with thoughts of horror movies and ghost stories. I pulled myself together and adjusted the body back into position, ensuring the sheet was tightly secured. But the feeling of being watched, the coldness, and the eerie silence wouldn't leave me. We finally reached the station and parked the ambulance. I breathed a sigh of relief as I stepped out, the cool night air hitting my face. We wheeled the body into the morgue, and as we handed it over to the staff, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. But as we turned to leave, I couldn't help but glance back one last time. The sheet had slipped again, and the man's eyes seemed to follow me out the door. After we left the hospital, we got back into the ambulance and started our drive back to the station. The fog was thicker than ever, and visibility was almost non-existent. Mike was tense, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. Neither of us spoke. The radio crackled with static, and every shadow seemed to move in the periphery of my vision. As we drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I kept seeing movement in the rearview mirror, and at one point I was sure I saw a figure sitting in the back where the body had been. It was just a fleeting glance, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. It was a night I'll never forget.